I told you I would win the gold trophy!
The air in Baghdad shimmered and sang, not with the usual market din, but with a sharp, brassy sound of anticipation. From the marble steps of the great palace, Khalifa Harun al-Rashid, whose very name rolled like distant thunder, ascended his gilded throne. The herald's trumpet blared, a brazen, booming call that instantly silenced every hustle and hoot of the busy city square. "Hear ye! Hear ye!" the man cried, his voice cracking with consequence. "The Khalifa announces the great contest of wit and valor. The challenge, to leap the widest ditch in the world without so much as a whisper of contact to its murky, unknown bottom. The ditch, a yawning, gaping chasm carved into the sun-scorched earth beyond the city walls, must be completely spanned. The prize? A purse heavy with shining, shimmering gold dinars and the most coveted title of chief advisor to the palace." The crowd gasped, a collective, sharp intake of breath followed by a frenzied, foot-stomping cheer. The challenge itself was a paradox, a physical impossibility cloaked in philosophical guise. How could one leap the widest ditch in the world? Was it a trick of distance or a trick of the mind? The news spread through the city like a swift, sizzling flame. Every ear heard the call, and every mind began to churn and scheme. The ditch itself became a subject of myth and terror, its edges said to be sheer and slick, its depths hiding the shallows of despair. Scholars debated its dimensions, engineers proposed bridges, athletes practiced leaps that were more flights of fancy than feats of physics. The sheer audacity of the Khalifa's challenge electrified the populace, promising glory to the ingenious and ridicule to the foolhardy. The prize, however, was no laughing matter. The weight of the gold was tempting, but the political power of the chief advisor role was an irresistible lure to the city's elite. Families began betting fortunes, and the streets were quickly filled with the clatter and clang of impromptu training sessions. Through the bustling chaos, the image of Abu Nawas, the city's favorite rogue philosopher, remained conspicuously absent from the clamor. His house stood quiet, radiating a peculiar stillness, an almost impudent peace amid the rising tide of frantic preparations. The great contest was set, and the stage was ready for a spectacular demonstration of human ingenuity or utter folly. The people waited, breathless, for the first sign of the true contenders. The spirit of competition sizzled and crackled across Baghdad. The city, usually content with the gentle rhythms of trade and prayer, now vibrated with the harsh, driving beat of ambition. Every alley became a training ground, every rooftop a vantage point for planning. The hopefuls were a motley, marvelous collection of the brave, the vain, and the truly foolish. Foremost among the contenders was the pompous Sir Hashim the Haughty, known throughout the bazaars as Tuan Haji Sambong. Sir Hashim, a man whose chest puffed out with perpetual pride, was an imposing sight. He boasted a magnificent, if entirely useless, contraption, a pair of custom-made spring-loaded boots that looked like two iron frying pans bolted to his feet. Every time he practiced, the springs would make a grating metallic squeak sound, followed by a thud, as he invariably landed flat on his back, much to the muffled snickers of onlookers. "Just calibrating the velocity," he would bark, his face red with frustration, before dusting off his silk robes. Then there was Scholar Zaki, whose confidence rested entirely on mathematical calculations. He carried a parchment roll covered in dense, spidery equations, whispering to himself about trajectory, momentum, and the curvature of the Earth. Zaki didn't practice jumping. He practiced staring. He would stand at the edge of imaginary chasms, scribbling furiously, his pen scratching against the paper with a fidgety sh sound. His strategy, he claimed, was simply to know the perfect angle and speed, rendering the physical act trivial. The air was thick with competitive bravado and bluster. One hopeful brought a pet hawk, convinced he could train it to carry him across. Another attempted to build wings from date palms and twine, resulting in a disastrous feathery whoosh and a wet sploosh into a public fountain. The sounds of their striving were a cacophony of clamor, the clang crash of failed machinery, the shrill sudden cries of surprise, and the constant murmur of mockery from the street corner critics. All of them shared one thing, a belief that the challenge could be solved through sheer effort, complex tools, or esoteric knowledge. Their focus was fixed on the ditch itself, an obsession that blinded them to the possibility of a solution lying outside the physical domain. They were sweating, struggling, and stressing, their faces etched with the strain of their ambition. They saw the ditch as an obstacle to be conquered, never as a riddle to be solved. And through it all, the grand, luxurious prize, the glint of the gold, the gravity of the title, remained the singular beacon driving their increasingly desperate maneuvers. While the rest of Baghdad was in a feverish, flailing frenzy, Abu Nawas was a study in profound, almost infuriating tranquility. His modest dwelling, usually a hub of neighborhood gossip and laughter, was now a sanctuary of silence. One sunny afternoon, while the haughty Hashim was attempting a particularly dramatic but futile spring boot maneuver that ended with a dignity-shattering clatter nearby, Abu Nawas was observed by his neighbor, the baker Taufik. Taufik found Abu Nawas seated on a simple woven mat beneath a broad, leafy fig tree. He wasn't sketching plans or consulting ancient texts. Instead, he was delicately peeling a ripe purple fig, its skin tearing with a satisfying, soft rip sound, before he popped the sweet fruit into his mouth with an audible, blissful munch and a gentle ah of contentment. Beside him, a fishing rod was propped up, the line dangling into a completely dry, sun-baked stretch of creek bed. "Abu Nawas!" Taufik exclaimed, wiping the flour from his brow. "The contest is but a week away. The streets are thick with gold-hungry lunatics. Even old Hakim the librarian is trying to fashion a hot air balloon. Why, in the name of the Prophet, are you fishing in a bed of dry clay?" Abu Nawas slowly turned his head, his eyes twinkling like distant stars. He took another bite of the fig, chewing slowly, the silence drawing out Taufik's impatience. "My dear Taufik," Abu Nawas said, finally, his voice a low, lyrical drone, "you see me fishing, but I see myself practicing patience. Patience, Taufik, is the deepest ditch of all, and I am quite good at traversing it." "But the great contest, the Khalifa's prize, the ditch, are you not even practicing the leap?" Taufik's voice rose to a sharp, questioning pitch. Abu Nawas sighed contentedly and adjusted his simple, worn cotton tunic. He picked up his rod and gave the empty air a thoughtful whip of the line. "Practicing the leap, you say? Why tire the legs when the mind is ready?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial hush and a shh. I am, my friend, preparing the only strategy guaranteed to win, not doing anything at all." Taufik blinked, his mind whirling like a bewildered fly. "Not doing anything? You mean you forfeit?" "Forfeit?" Abu Nawas chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound deep in his chest. "No, Taufik, I am preparing to win without participating, thus fulfilling the challenge's true meaning, to transcend the obstacle itself. All these others are jumping into the challenge. I shall simply walk past it." Taufik walked away, shaking his head, convinced that the great wit had finally lost his senses. But as the baker retreated, Abu Nawas let out a sly, silent smile. His strategy of non-participation was already underway. Abu Nawas's declared strategy of non-participation was in fact the most intricate preparation of all. While the other contestants were consumed by the physical dimensions of the ditch, its sheer span, slope, and surface, Abu Nawas was consumed by its philosophical dimensions. He understood that the true test of the Khalifa lay not in brute strength, but in intellectual cunning. His goal was not to clear the physical barrier, but to transcend the very concept of the barrier. He spent his days not jumping, but strolling and observing. He walked the perimeter of the designated contest area at the city's edge, his old sandals making a soft, rhythmic thwack-thwack against the dusty path. He studied the terrain, the placement of the judge's canopy, and most importantly, the psychological weak points of his rivals. He was a silent, subtle spy of the soul. The contest rules were simple: leap the ditch without touching its surface. Abu Nawas's strategy hinged on one crucial realization: the moment one attempts to jump, one acknowledges the ditch's power and reality. To truly win was to render the ditch irrelevant. He began his subtle preparations, which involved less action and more careful placement. He noted that the judges, particularly the two older wazir, were sticklers for procedure and easily distracted by theatrics. He also noted that Tuan Haji Sambong, the arrogant favorite, was so self-absorbed that he saw every shadow and stumble as a personal slight from fate. Abu Nawas's real genius lay in his ability to prepare for the inevitable failure of his rivals. He knew the ditch was too wide. He knew their crazy inventions would fail. His victory would be built on the ensuing vacuum of achievement. He was preparing to fill the silence after the crash and clang of their collective defeat with a single, stunning sentence. He made a few discreet visits to the marketplace, buying nothing of value, but talking to the vendors and the small children who would inevitably gather for the spectacle. He paid one small, bright-eyed boy a single copper coin to perform a minor, entirely innocuous task on the morning of the contest. The task was so trivial, perhaps scattering a handful of brightly colored pebbles near the judge's table, that the boy thought Abu Nawas was simply eccentric. As the sun set on the final day before the contest, Abu Nawas stood overlooking the vast, daunting trench. He didn't feel the chill of defeat or the heat of ambition. He felt a quiet, calming confidence. He wasn't preparing to be the best jumper. He was preparing to be the best thinker. The ditch lay before him, dark and inviting, and with a silent snicker, Abu Nawas turned his back on it, ready for the next phase of his elegant plot. The sun was high and fiercely scorching on the day before the contest. Abu Nawas proceeded to execute the second, more mischievous part of his plan, which involved his most prized, though utterly worthless, possession: his old, well-worn pair of leather sandals. These sandals had seen countless miles and were cracked and faded, making a faint, dry flop-flop sound with every step. He walked past the area where Tuan Haji Sambon was practicing his spring boot technique. Sir Hashim, dressed in a resplendent but impractical gold-threaded waistcoat, was deeply immersed in a dramatic leaping sequence, shouting motivational slogans that echoed with a hollow boom off the nearby hills. Abu Nawas casually forgot one of his sandals. He placed it not directly in the path, but strategically near a patch of loose gravel, just at the very end point of Sir Hashim's calculated landing zone. He then slipped his remaining sandal onto his opposite foot, walking away with a deliberate, uneven, scuff, drag, flop, limp, looking utterly preoccupied with a small, wilting flower he had found. Sure enough, minutes later, Sir Hashim launched himself into the air, his spring boots making a tremendous straining twang sound. He was mid-flight, his face a mask of determination when his eyes locked onto the sandal. To Sir Hashim, this wasn't just a piece of discarded footwear, it was a cosmic insult, a piece of detritus deliberately placed to ruin his perfect alignment. Instead of landing cleanly, Sir Hashim contorted his body, trying desperately to avoid the ignoble obstacle. The unexpected movement threw off his delicate calibration. The spring boots, instead of cushioning his landing, twisted wildly. There was a sickening, grinding scrunch, clank of metal, followed by Sir Hashim landing in a humiliating, crumpled heap, his waistcoat now covered in dirt and his pride severely punctured. He didn't suffer injury, but his confidence, that fragile edifice of arrogance, shattered like a clay pot dropped from a height. He scrambled up, his face pale with rage, clutching the offending sandal. "A curse upon this wicked, wretched footwear," he snarled, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. The other competitors, witnessing this small but devastating failure, immediately saw it as a terrible omen. The ditch itself hadn't beaten him, a common sandal had. The air, which had been buzzing with bravado, was suddenly filled with a nervous, fluttering silence. Abu Nawas's intervention was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. He hadn't just placed a sandal, he had placed a seed of doubt, which quickly grew into a massive, choking weed of moral collapse among his rivals. The morning of the contest broke with a fierce, blinding sun. Thousands of spectators, clad in every shade of silk and wool, had gathered at the edge of the city. Banners snapped and fluttered in the hot, dry breeze, and the air was thick with the sweet, sickly scent of nervous perspiration and expensive perfumes. At the center of the spectacle was the great ditch, a truly daunting sight. It was wider than any stream, deeper than any well, a magnificent, mute declaration of the near impossible. Khalifa Harun al-Rashid arrived with his court, his regal robes catching the light with a silken swish-swish sound. He settled into his cushioned reviewing stand, his expression a blend of excitement and skeptical amusement. The competitors, looking grim-faced and underslept, lined up. Sir Hashim, though wearing a fresh waistcoat, still looked haunted, constantly glancing down at his feet. The atmosphere was taut, a stretched string waiting for the bow. As the wazir read out the final rules, his voice monotonous and gravelly, the Khalifa scanned the faces below. He frowned slightly, a small, nagging absence registered in his mind. He leaned over to the chief wazir, whispering urgently, his voice cutting through the formal silence. "Wazir, one key element is missing from this theatrical display. Where is the man who always provides the entertainment, the challenge to my patience? Where is Abu Nawas?" The wazir, a man who respected procedure more than wit, cleared his throat with a dry ahem. "Your Eminence, Abu Nawas formally declined participation. When pressed by the palace guard, he offered a cryptic, almost impertinent reply. He stated, and I quote, "I have already foreseen the result, and therefore my presence is redundant." A ripple of disappointment sighed through the royal stand. The Khalifa, though annoyed by Abu Nawas's typical defiance, felt a genuine pang of curiosity. Abu Nawas had a habit of knowing things others did not. The Khalifa tried to shake off the feeling, his impatience mounting. "Redundant, is it? We shall see how redundant he feels when he hears the victor's trumpet blare." The wazir, relieved, signaled the start of the challenge. The crowd hushed, a great, expectant silence. But the shadow of Abu Nawas's absence lingered, a quiet, challenging riddle hanging in the hot desert air. The stage was set for failure, and the only man who knew it was not even in the audience. The competition began with a flurry of ill-conceived activity. The air was thick with tension, and the first challenger stepped forward. Pasang Aw, the man with the magnificent yet fundamentally flawed spring boots. Sir Hashim, having mentally recovered from the sandal incident, believed that sheer mechanical force was the answer. He took his mark, his heavy boots thudding on the dusty ground. He began a strange, lumbering run, building momentum. The crowd roared its encouragement, a great swelling wave of sound. At the edge of the chasm, he leapt, the springs in his custom boots compressing with a painful, drawn-out ear crunch. Instead of launching him forward, however, the faulty springs propelled him primarily upward and slightly backward. He executed a majestic, slow-motion arc, but in the wrong direction. He sailed high, his arms windmilling desperately before descending rapidly. He landed heavily, not across the ditch, but 10 feet behind the starting line, the impact causing the springs to violently recoil, making a rapid, vibrating jing-jing-jing, and a final kerplunk as he sat down hard, dusty, and defeated. The crowd's roar dissolved into a spontaneous, sharp burst of laughter. Next was Pasang B, the scholar Zaki, confident in his physics. He approached the edge with an almost religious reverence, his parchment clutched in his hand. He consulted his calculations one last time, mumbling incantations about the optimal gravitational displacement factor. Zaki decided that the jump required zero physical effort, only perfect timing. He stood perfectly still at the precipice. He then bent his knees, concentrated until his eyes nearly popped, and launched himself with a single furious hop. Unfortunately, Zaki's physical ability did not match his mental acuity. He managed to propel himself exactly 3 feet. He dropped into the first few inches of the ditch's air, his movement suddenly stalling. The sheer panic caused him to emit a high-pitched, sudden squeak before he tumbled down the gentle slope of the ditch's side, ending up in a dazed, crumpled heap, having failed to even reach the ditch's widest point. He was officially out, cold, and slightly concussed. The remaining competitors fared no better. The man with the homemade wings took a running start that ended in an immediate faceplant, his brittle wings snapping with a dry, desperate crackle. Another tried a complicated sequence of flips that only managed to land him neatly back on his side of the ditch, dizzy and green. The reality was undeniable. The ditch was simply too wide for any physical, mechanical, or mystical solution. The contest was a spectacular failure, a gallery of human folly, soundtracked by crashes, squeaks, and humiliated groans. The initial laughter that had greeted these spectacular failures of the contestants gradually subsided, replaced by a heavy, deflating silence. The judges, a panel of stoic, bearded officials, looked genuinely distressed. They consulted their parchments, whispering in low, earnest tones that carried the dry, brittle sound of disappointment. They approached the Khalifa, bowing deeply, their robes making a soft whoosh sound against the ground. The chief wazir cleared his throat dramatically. "Your Eminence," he began, his voice strained and formal. "We have witnessed 20 attempts by 20 of Baghdad's most ambitious citizens. We have seen springs, ropes, calculations, and sheer desperation. Yet the ditch, in its vastness, remains unleapt. The challenge stands and the winner's podium remains empty." Khalifa Harun al-Rashid, who had initially been entertained, now looked genuinely vexed. The setting sun cast long, orange shadows across his face, emphasizing his mounting irritation. This contest was meant to showcase the brilliance of his people, yet it had only illuminated their limits. The vast sum of gold and the prestige of the chief advisor title hung in the air, a magnificent but meaningless symbol. He slammed his hand lightly on the armrest of his throne, the sound a sharp, decisive thwack that made the wazir jump. "Is this it?" he demanded, his voice resonating with authority. "Did I offer up the wealth of the realm and the highest office in the land only to conclude that the only thing my people can achieve is a communal display of incompetence?" He rose slowly, his towering figure commanding the attention of the hushed crowd. "I declared this a contest of wit and valor. Where is the wit? Where is the insight that could truly solve this impossible challenge? Are there truly no wise men in all of Baghdad capable of resolving this impossible challenge?" His voice was laced with a bitter, challenging edge. The crowd stood silent, their heads bowed, the sound of their collective failure hanging heavy in the dusty air. The great prize was unclaimed, a monument to the unleapt ditch, and the Calipha's frustration reached its peak. It was precisely at the moment of the Calipha's most profound despair, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and cast the ditch into deep, menacing shadow, that a distinct, unusual sound broke the ceremonial quiet. A soft, liquid slurp, followed by the gentle tink-tink-tink of ceramics. All heads turned. Slowly, deliberately, and with an air of complete unconcern, Abu Nawas ambled into the contest arena. He was dressed in his same simple tunic and was carrying a small, beautifully woven basket on one arm, and in the other hand a steaming cup of tea. He took a long, noisy "ah" of satisfaction from his drink as he approached the royal stand. His movements were a stark contrast to the rigid, formal posturing of the officials and the exhausted slump of the defeated competitors. He moved with a breezy, almost scandalous nonchalance. Khalifa Harun al-Rashid, seeing the man who had dismissed his entire ceremony as redundant, felt a rush of heat rise to his face. His voice, when he spoke, was low, dangerous, and laced with suppressed fury. "Abu Nawas," the Calipha roared, his voice echoing across the silent plain, "you insolent rogue! You spurned the royal summons, you refused to participate. And yet you have the audacity to stroll in now as if arriving for a garden party, sipping tea and carrying a picnic basket? Why, I ask you, do you come now? You declared you would not participate." Abu Nawas stopped precisely 10 feet from the throne, bowed low with an exaggerated flourish that nearly spilled his tea, and then straightened up, his face radiating an air of blissful, unshakable certainty. The soft clink of his teacup against the saucer was the only sound for a tense, drawn-out moment. "Your Eminence," Abu Nawas replied, his voice calm, clear, and utterly respectful. "I have come precisely because I declined to participate. I have come because the true competition has just concluded. The competition of those who failed to understand the question. The time for foolish leaping is over. The time for wisdom has arrived, and I am here to collect my prize." The defeated competitors, including the shell-shocked Sir Hashim, looked up, a great collective gasp rippling through their ranks. Abu Nawas placed his basket and cup on the ground, with a deliberate, soft tup sound, capturing the attention of every single soul present. He then turned to face the Khalifa, performing an elaborate, sweeping bow that was equal parts mockery and respect. "Tuanku," he began, his voice carrying clearly in the cool evening air, "I stand before you, the only person present who has successfully traversed the widest ditch in the world without ever touching its surface." The Khalifa looked utterly bewildered. "Impossible! Preposterous! How can you claim such a feat? We watched every man fall short, and you, sir, were not even present to begin." His voice rose to a sharp, incredulous question. "Ah, but Tuanku," Abu Nawas countered, with a genial smile. "That is precisely the point. The others sought to win by fulfilling the physical demand. They sought to leap the ditch of distance. But did you not declare this a contest of wit and valor?" He gestured dramatically toward the gaping chasm. "Look upon this physical hole. It is wide, yes, but it is not the widest ditch in the world. The widest ditch, Tuanku, is not made of earth and stone. It is made of thought and deed." Abu Nawas then presented his central argument, speaking with a rhetorical flourish that made the wazir forget to take notes. "The widest ditch in the world, Your Eminence, is the one that lies between knowing and doing. It is the chasm between ambition and attainment. It is the terrible, endless gulf between ignorance and wisdom." He then delivered his triumphant conclusion, his voice ringing with conviction. "All those men," he gestured toward the line of dusty, dejected competitors, "were consumed by the ditch of physical impossibility. They were too ambitious, too vain, too focused on the mere act of jumping. By choosing to not participate, I demonstrated a wisdom they lacked. I did not waste my energy leaping a false obstacle. I did not succumb to the pride that made them fall. My decision to stay home proved that I had already successfully traversed the widest, most challenging ditch of all, the gap that separates the fool from the philosopher. I did not touch the earth because my mind already flew across the heavens." The arena was utterly silent, save for the soft rustle of the Khalifa's robes as he leaned forward, intrigued. Abu Nawas's argument, a magnificent piece of verbal judo, hung suspended in the evening air. The crowd was utterly mesmerized, their earlier laughter and frustration now replaced by a dawning, delightful confusion. He took a step closer, his hands spread wide in a gesture of honest explanation. "Consider, Tuanku," he urged, his voice now lower, more persuasive. "If I had attempted to jump, I would have certainly failed, just as they did. I would have landed in the dirt, just another defeated man. My physical failure would have been proof that I had not solved the problem. But by not jumping, I demonstrated that I understood the true nature of your challenge, that it was a test of finding the path where the ditch ceases to exist. I chose the path of abstention and insight, which is always wider and deeper than any path of simple action." He then pulled a small, rolled-up map from his pocket, not a map of Baghdad, but a crude, philosophical drawing of the world. He pointed to the immense blank space representing the entire Earth. "The other widest ditch in the world," he declared, "is the gap between the two farthest points on this earth. No man, not even with the grandest spring boots," he shot a quick, mischievous glance at Sir Hashem, "can leap that distance in a single bound. But a man who sits still, contemplating the infinite, has already transcended distance. He has leaped the philosophical chasm. My wisdom made me not participate, and in that non-participation, I proved my superiority over all those who participated blindly." He concluded with a dramatic bow. "I did not need to jump the physical ditch, because my wisdom had already carried me across the greatest ditch, the ditch of blind, unthinking conformity. I transcended the obstacle by refusing to acknowledge its physical existence as the true test. The transformation in the crowd was instantaneous. A few sharp thinkers in the front began to nod vigorously, their faces alight with comprehension. The sound of their understanding, a collective aha of realization, spread rapidly. The defeated competitors, initially indignant, slowly began to lower their heads, realizing the undeniable elegance of Abu Nawas's logic. The Khalifa, a man who prized intelligence above all else, was captivated. The Khalifa, Harun al-Rashid, sat motionless for what felt like an eternity, the silence punctuated only by the faint whir of a distant windmill. Then, slowly, a smile began to spread across his face. It started as a small, private twitch, grew into a grin, and finally erupted into a magnificent, booming roar of laughter that shook the very foundations of the royal stand. The sound of his laughter, a deep, resonant ha-ha-ha-ho, was infectious. The entire court, relieved from the heavy tension, burst into spontaneous applause and joyous collective merriment. "Abu Nawas!" the Khalifa finally managed to shout, wiping a tear from his eye. "You are an infuriating genius. Your logic is crooked, paradoxical, and utterly, undeniably sound. You have solved the riddle by changing the terms of the puzzle itself." The wazir, who had recovered his composure, began to protest, his voice a high, reedy complaint. "But your eminence, he did not follow the rules. He did not even approach the ditch. Surely a winner must participate." The Khalifa cut him short with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Silence, wazir. The point of the contest was to find the one person who could leap the ditch without touching it. Abu Nawas did precisely that. He leaped the ditch of conventional thinking. His victory is not physical, but philosophical, which to me is the greater prize." He turned to the defeated competitors, who were now looking less angry and more humbled. "You all lost to an empty space and a clever tongue. Consider this a lesson. To lose to Abu Nawas is a victory in itself, for it means you have learned something truly profound. Abu Nawas, I declare you the winner. The gold is yours, and the title of chief advisor is yours, for only a fool would refuse the counsel of a man who can win a race without moving his feet." The cheering erupted again, louder this time. A great, joyous, cacophonous roar of approval and admiration. Abu Nawas, the uncontested victor, bowed again, the light of triumph dancing in his eyes. With great pomp and ceremony, the Khalifa ordered the purse of gold dinars to be brought forth. The sack was heavy, making a satisfying, metallic chink-clink-chink sound as the guard struggled to lift it. Abu Nawas accepted the prize with a quiet dignity, but his moment of solemnity was short-lived. The Khalifa, still amused, pressed him one last time. "Tell me, Abu Nawas, now that you possess this vast fortune and this powerful title, what is the very first thing you plan to do? Will you use the gold to build a bridge over that ridiculous ditch?" Abu Nawas considered the question, tilting his head. He looked down at the heavy purse, then over at the defeated, weary Sir Hashim, who was still muttering about curses and spring tension. A wicked smile played on his lips. "A bridge, Tuanku? Absolutely not," Abu Nawas replied, his voice clear and mischievous. "I shall use this gold for a much more important purpose. I shall use it to buy 1,000 pairs of new, utterly identical leather sandals." The Khalifa blinked, momentarily confused. 1,000 sandals? Why on earth, Abu Nawas? Why, for next year's contest, of course. I shall discreetly scatter them near every potential starting line. This will ensure that my esteemed competitors have plenty of fresh obstacles to avoid, forcing them to spend another year learning the true meaning of philosophy over footwork. And should anyone ask, I shall tell them I am simply ensuring the city's footwear inventory is well stocked. The crowd, which had expected a solemn statement about public works, instead dissolved into a final, tremendous burst of irrepressible giggles and guffaws. Even the defeated Hashim couldn't help but crack a reluctant smile. The official ceremony concluded, but the legend of Abu Nawas, the man who won the leaping contest by refusing to leap, had just begun. The whispers and rumors of his ingenuity traveled swiftly, on the back of the wind, cementing his reputation as the one true genius of Baghdad. He had shown everyone that true victory is not about conquering the world, but about conquering the mind. And so Abu Nawas walked away from the arena, the gold heavy in his hand, a spring in his non-leaping step, and the sound of the Khalifa's laughter ringing in his ears. The moral of the story was clear. When facing the widest ditch in the world, sometimes the best strategy is simply to stay put and think. The day after his victory, the transition of Abu Nawas into the role of chief advisor was perhaps the most unconventional event in Baghdad's long history of oddities. His new office was grand, furnished with carpets that offered a soft, silencing muffle to his footsteps, and overlooking gardens where fountains made a gentle, perpetual tis-his-tis. The wazir who had opposed him was now forced to serve him, his face a mask of strained, starched politeness. Abu Nawas sat at a massive mahogany desk, the very size of which seemed to mock his simplicity, occasionally tapping his finger on the polished wood with a light, insistent tick-tock. The first duty of the new chief advisor was to sign the official decrees validating the contest results. He signed the documents with a flourish, his quill scratching against the parchment with a nervous, quick zizz. The wazir, eager to pin Abu Nawas down with bureaucracy, presented a stack of serious issues: grain tariffs, border skirmishes, and city drainage plans. "Your Eminence," the wazir began, his voice smooth as oiled silt, "these matters require immediate and sober deliberation. What is your first edict as chief advisor?" The officials gathered expecting a grand, serious pronouncement fitting the position. Abu Nawas looked not at the maps or the reports, but at the grand ceremonial mace resting near his chair, a heavy object of gold and ruby that was meant to symbolize royal power. He picked it up, the movement causing the gems to rattle softly, a delicate musical jingle. He stood up, walked to the nearest open window overlooking the courtyard, and, without warning, tossed the ceremonial mace out onto the stone below. It hit the pavement with a loud, surprising crack, followed by a dull, final thud. The wazir and the assembled officials gasped in unison, the sound like the tearing of fragile cloth. "There," Abu Nawas announced, turning back with a serene expression. "That is my first edict. The symbol of power is now in the dirt. My second edict? Bring me the cheapest, most durable sandals from the marketplace. The true power of Baghdad lies not in the gold of its symbols, but in the feet of its common people. Let us focus on what is on the ground." The officials exchanged bewildered glances, the only sound, the eerie, sudden quiet where the mace had been. The news of the chief advisor's bizarre spending habits hit the Baghdad bazaar with the force of a sandstorm. Abu Nawas, escorted by two bewildered palace guards, arrived not in a royal carriage, but on a clattering wooden donkey cart, which made a creaky, complaining ee-ah sound as it navigated the narrow lanes. He carried his great sack of gold, the dinars within clanging and chattering with every bump. He stood before the first cobbler, a grizzled man named Musa, whose workshop smelled deliciously of tannin and sweat. "Musa," Abu Nawas announced loudly, "I require 1,000 pairs of your cheapest, most durable leather sandals. They must all be identical. No fancy stitching, no silk lining. Plain, strong, and plentiful." Musa's eyes nearly popped out of his head. 1,000, Your Eminence? Are you equipping an entire army of hermits? The request immediately caused a market panic. The price of leather, which had been steady and predictable, suddenly soared. The constant pock of hammers driving nails into soles instantly tripled in speed across the city as every cobbler rushed to meet the sudden, inexplicable demand. Abu Nawas, observing the chaos he had created, chuckled deeply. He paid in pure gold, counting out the dinars with a sharp, satisfying dink, dink, dink onto Musa's counter. The transaction was a spectacle, attracting a crowd that murmured and muttered with fascination. Rival merchants, fearing a footwear monopoly, began bidding up the prices of hides, their voices rising to a frantic "Yelp, yelp!" The sheer volume of the order required a fleet of carts, which now made a heavy, rumbling drum, drum, drum across the city cobblestones, loaded high with mountains of identical brown leather sandals. The entire economic focus of Baghdad shifted from high-value silks and spices to cheap, humble footwear. Abu Nawas, meanwhile, was completely serene, ensuring the sandals were stacked neatly and correctly, a perfect physical manifestation of his philosophical point. The people watched, utterly baffled, convinced their new chief advisor was either a brilliant madman or a secret agent of the Cobblers Guild. Sir Hashim the Haughty, stripped of his chief advisor dreams and his ridiculous spring boots, which now lay in a corner, emitting a sad, broken clang whenever someone walked past, could not find peace. His defeat was not physical, it was intellectual, and that stung worse than 1,000 falls. He paced his luxurious study, his heavy slippers making a fussy, agitated swoosh, swoosh against the marble floor. "It is a trick," he kept muttering to his reflection, his voice a low, self-pitying drone. "A rhetorical sleight of hand. The ditch was real. The leap was required. How can one win a race without running?" He retrieved the offending sandal, the very one Abu Nawas had forgotten, from a velvet cushion where he had placed it. He turned it over, examining the cracked leather and the worn sole, his fingers tracing the rough, dry texture. He was trying to find some hidden mechanism, some secret wire or magnetic pull that explained his stumble in Chapter 5. He pressed on the leather, listening for a secret click or a beep, but heard nothing but the sandal's honest silence. Then came the news of the 1,000-sandal purchase. This, to Sir Hashim, was confirmation of a deeper, hidden, non-philosophical plot. "He is laying a trap," Sir Hashim hissed, grabbing a piece of charcoal and scratching furiously onto a massive chalkboard, the chalk making a grating, unpleasant chus, chus, chus sound. "He is laying a trap," Sir Hashim hissed, grabbing a piece of charcoal and scratching furiously onto a massive chalkboard, the chalk making a grating, unpleasant chus, chus, chus sound. "He is turning the contest into a minefield. He knows the Khalifa will hold the event again, and now he is ensuring no one can take a proper running start. It is not about wisdom, it is about sabotage on a colossal footwear-based scale." He refused to see the brilliance of the philosophical argument. His mind was too entrenched in the physical. He began drawing complex diagrams of foot trajectories overlaid with predicted sandal placement patterns, convinced he was decoding a grand engineering conspiracy. While Baghdad saw a madman buying shoes, Sir Hashim saw a master strategist creating the most complex, unjumpable obstacle course in history. His doubt was not quelled by Abu Nawas's victory. It was merely redirected into a feverish, obsessive quest for the hidden mechanism of Abu Nawas's genius. The scattering of the 1,000 identical sandals began a week later, turning the contest grounds into a surreal mosaic of leather. Abu Nawas's men, following his precise, geometrically absurd instructions, placed the sandals in specific patterns: one circle of 10, one triangle of 7, a long looping line of 50 that led nowhere. Each placement was accompanied by a theatrical flop sound as the shoe hit the dirt. The remaining defeated competitors, Scholar Zaki, the Winged Man, and others, gathered immediately, forming the Council for the Interpretation of Footwear. They abandoned their old contraptions and instead brought notebooks and compasses. "Observe the pattern, gentlemen," declared Scholar Zaki, pointing a trembling finger at a grouping of 3 sandals. "The triangle, it represents the 3 dimensions of space. Abu Nawas is telling us the next stitch will be 3-dimensional. We must jump up, not across." He stomped his foot, the sound a decisive thwump. Another competitor, a mystic named Omar, shook his head violently, his beard swishing like a damp broom. "Nonsense! The placement is a spiritual map. The curve of 50 sandals is a representation of the winding path of life, and the single isolated sandal near the palace wall is the solitary soul. He is telling us the winner must jump inward." His voice was a deep, vibrating hum. They argued for hours, the hissing whispers of their debate contrasting sharply with the loud, simple reality of the leather objects around them. They meticulously recorded the distance between each flop and flip, trying to derive a hidden equation. Meanwhile, Abu Nawas was enjoying his new title, occasionally glancing out the window at the spectacle. He had turned the arena of physical competition into an arena of psychological torture, a philosophical trap baited with common leather. The irony was perfect. The competitors had lost because they jumped when they should have thought, and now they thought when they should have simply accepted the jump was impossible. The true contest had become the futile attempt to understand the meaning of the footwear. Khalifa Harun al-Rashid watched the entire spectacle from his private pavilion, which overlooked both the palace courtyard and the distant contest fields. He had dispatched a courtier to retrieve his ceremonial mace, which now sat sheepishly on a velvet pillow, its royal dignity slightly dented from the fall. He leaned back in his chair, sipping a drink chilled with mountain snow, the ice making a tiny refreshing clink against the glass. He was constantly being informed of his new chief advisor's daily activities, the sandal order, the price spike in leather, and the ridiculous Council for the Interpretation of Footwear. "Is it true, Wazir," the Khalifa asked, his voice low and rich with amusement, "that my defeated champions are now analyzing the geometry of footwear arrangements?" The Wazir, still smarting from the mace incident, nodded stiffly. "They spend hours charting the position of the leather, Tuanku. They believe Abu Nawas has encoded the next challenge into the arrangement of the soles. It is madness." The Wazir shook his head, his heavy robes making a disapproving, silken shft. The Khalifa laughed, a warm, satisfied sound. "Madness? No, Wazir. It is the continuation of wisdom. I asked them to jump the widest ditch in the world. They failed. Abu Nawas showed them that the ditch was their own overly serious, ambitious minds. Now he is simply ensuring that they remain focused on the wrong target." keeping the path clear for him should he ever choose to formally enter a race. He gazed out over Baghdad, where the smoke from the cobbler's quickened fires rose in a thin, steady plume. Look how he has inverted the symbol of power. The golden mace is trivial. The humble sandal scattered across the plain is the new object of obsession. My decision was correct. I appointed a chief advisor not to solve problems of state with brute force, but to solve the problems of the people's thinking with wit and paradox. He raised his glass in a silent toast to the distant, unseen Abu Nawas. The laughter faded, replaced by the calm, contemplative sound of the flowing palace stream, a rhythm that seemed to signal that, for now, all was right with the world thanks to 1,000 leather sandals.